Good morning, everyone. We are here from Dawn Mountain in Houston, Texas.
Hey, good morning. And hi, Mark and Chandati, the people that we can see.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So before we open the floor for question llamas, I was wondering, do you want to say something a little bit about the program?
Yes, we do.
We do indeed. Thank you so much. We have called this program The Brilliant Basics of Buddhism because it's brilliant and multifaceted and really does ground us in the essentials of the Buddhist path and the essentials of all levels of the Buddhist path, Sutra, Tantra, Dzogchen. Our teachers have always said in teaching Ngondro, the foundational practices, these brilliant basics, that they include the whole path. Patrul Rinpoche famously said that he thinks they're more profound than any other. So we are quite delighted to share this with you. We have organized it in such a way that we hope will be work fluidly with, modern life. We ourselves, and traditionally, we receive teachings in person and do retreat and do daily, begin to bring the foundational practices, these brilliant basics, into our lives. So one of the things that this course offers is, if you haven't already done so, is the opportunity to really stabilize a daily practice. And many of you listening and who will be doing the course already have a daily practice. That's wonderful. Gives you an opportunity to get familiar with what the tradition itself considers utterly essential. Essential for what? Essential for beginning to wean us away from ordinary mind, including especially the habits that we have that don't work so well for us. Gradually, slowly, we can, rather early on in doing this practice, feel some difference. Doesn't mean your life is or all your difficulties are suddenly evaporated from one day to the next. Deep process doesn't work like that. But you can feel something from it. I think that's been our experience. That's been the experience of the people we know who have done it. So you can take it at your own pace if you wish. You will get a video, approximately 25, 30-minute video, approximately once a week. And this will be accompanied by audios, which are actually guided meditation instructions. You will be introduced to the foundational practices, to Jigme Lingpa's text, and also to Ajahn Pela Rinpoche's text, who actually, at my request, distilled it. As he said, for those who don't have enough time to practice the Heart Essence Vast Expanse, the Longchen Nyingtik Ngondro of Jigme Lingpa, then please, we will do his. And you will have the opportunity to see both side by side. At the very least, you begin to appreciate how profoundly and beautifully it is, in fact, all present in this much shorter version. We begin in January. It is possible to join at any time and take it as a self-paced course. For those of you who begin in January, we will be meeting and there will be peer meetings during the next 6 months and also in the following 12 months, because we're doing this in 2 parts, so that you will have a chance to practice with other Sangha members, get some social support in that way, which is very important. And also we will meet with you so that you have questions about your practice. We want to be there. We want to support you. We will also recommend reading that you can do to whatever extent fits into your schedule. Of course, Words of My Perfect Teacher. Also, our own teachers, Tantric Practice in Nyingma. Also, for the first time, we will be teaching from Ajahn Trungpa's Tarlam Seldra and Lamp Lighting the Path, which I and some others have been working for many years to translate. And we now have a penultimate version that we will share with those of you who participate. So that's an overview. It's very inspiring for us to be able to do this, and we can say more about that in a moment. Do you wish to say something? Yeah.
Some of what I'll say is a repetition, but somehow it always seems like it's coming from a slightly different angle when it comes from a different person. Buddhist practice is practice for developing compassion and ease. I think it's important for us to frame what we're doing is about deepening our compassion and deepening our profound ease of mind, profound ease of mind. And so these teachings are a foundational set of teachings that we will be offering. So really, if someone knew nothing about Buddhism, this course would be an excellent introduction to very, very significant pieces of Buddhist teachings and practice. It's an excellent introduction to Buddhism. For those already involved, either who know something about Buddhism, or even some who are already accumulating or practicing the foundational practices, this will no doubt serve as a booster, an inspiration, a reinvigoration of our practice. It is a great opportunity for all of us to have closer contact with the lineage of Adzom Drukpa. Our current teacher, Adzom Pela Rinpoche, in the prior life was the son of Adzom Drukpa. And Adzom Pela Rinpoche requested that Anne translate Adzom Drukpa's commentary on the foundational practices. And we feel there are many, many lineal blessings associated with just hearing the material from Adzom Drukpa, and we are excited about sharing that with everyone. The practice text that will ultimately be used by all of us is the condensed version of the foundational practices developed by Adzom Pela Rinpoche. And part of what we will be doing is teaching that text so that individuals can have a daily practice of foundational practices, depending on who you are and how accustomed you are to doing it. That could take anywhere between 15 minutes, half an hour, or 45 minutes as a daily practice, but you at least would know how to do a daily practice of very, very profound and useful Buddhist practices. And finally, there is a way to what's called accumulate foundational practices. And there are certain numbers associated with doing certain practices, which are, when completed, the gateway for another layer of Dzogchen teachings, which are typically not shared if people have not completed the accumulation of those foundational practices. So there's many, many layers to this program, including an introduction for those who want an introduction, a daily practice for those who want a daily practice, and material for learning how to accumulate the practices so that one can ultimately move on to deeper Dzogchen teachings. With that, if there are questions, we'll open it up for questions.
Say hi to Guy. Welcome.
So I do see one question from Facebook. It says,
Okay.
how does doing a practice like this relate to the world and all the environmental problems among so much suffering that we all hear about every day?
What a great question. Thank you. One of the things about Ngondro that you are giving me an opportunity to mention is the way it begins to, in one way, reveal the world in a different way. In one way, begin to free us from some of the limitations around how we thought the world had to be. So, with respect to the crisis, ecological crises, which is deeply related with health crises, with immigration crises, with economic crises, one of the most important things that we learn in this practice and central to all Buddhist practice is the interrelationship among everything. And Buddhists who are writing about ecology now speak about this. One of the great griefs of the way things are proceeding now is that we have forgotten what indigenous peoples all over the planet have always known and continue to know, which is that everything is related. You can't build a billion cars on one side of the planet and not have it affect everyone and everything. So there's that sense of connection to recognizing that the world and our lives are fragile. That's actually one of the first meditations, to recognize that the way our lives unfold has much to do with the place where we live, how livable it is, how civilized it is. It also invites us to, there's kind of two sides to this crisis. There's the external stuff, which has to be dealt with, and some scientists are working on. And we can't forget that all of this came about because of certain kinds of internal orientations, greed being chief among them, and greed being based on a sense of really feeling separate enough from the world that we felt, or some peoples felt, that it was there to be manipulated for our personal or our particular national benefit, and forgetting that everything is connected. And so there has to be, for the kind of change that your question seems to me to suggest the necessity of, and that I believe is necessary, there also has to be some looking in. What was going on with people? What is going on with me that contributes to this situation?
I would say that
Mhm.
in order to confront all of the crises that we face today, social justice, environmental degradation and climate change, issues of gender inequality and poor treatment. Ultimately, we as individuals have to look at our engine room. What is going to allow us, with grace and energy and wisdom and compassion, to work in the world, which is in some ways getting way more complex by the minute. All of the concerns that are abroad in the land are amazingly significant. And if people don't have an internal working system that can sustain engagement, an engagement that is effective and compassionate, people burn out, they get angry, they get violent. And that just sort of furthers the whole cycle of negativity. And so practice is a way of honing the instrument, allowing us to be more compassionate, more intelligent, more considerate in the way that we engage with these issues, which are very, very profound and very, very problematic. It's a way of, in a way, I don't know if this is a good or bad analogy, but if you said, what does going to the gym have to do with working on problems of climate change? Well, if your body's not in order, you're not going to be able to do this work for a long time. And there's some real purposes to allowing people to have the most optimal physical functioning. This is for psychological and spiritual functioning, and definitely deepening our concerns for humans and concerns for the planet. And as Anne said, an appreciation for interdependence.
So very briefly, the actual topics involved as they unfold have to do with, say, 4 things that are absolutely central to practice, to life, and to reckoning with what you're talking about. One is the preciousness of life. Life is sacred, really, and it is fragile because of dependent arising, because of impermanence. That's important. Also important is the ability to look suffering in the face. And this is very difficult. And one of the difficulties we have is that people don't want to hear about climate change and the suffering that ensues, or are so overwhelmed that it's really not productive for them to hear about it. So we need to be able to look at suffering, and there's training in that. And we need to understand that our hearts, that hearts open to others are part of the recreation of this world. So dependent arising, the preciousness of life, being able to look at suffering and compassion for all of it.
Wonderful. So before we move on to our next Facebook question, I'd like to pause and ask if anyone in our Zoom would like to ask a question. Please wave at me. Yes.
But I would actually like to hear the Facebook questions first and then ask later, if that's okay.
Okay.
Or, I mean, yeah.
Okay. So our next question is, can you please talk about the blessings of this practice?
The blessings are integral to the practice. Waves of grace, we can translate the Tibetan word chinlap that often gets translated as blessings, literally waves of grace. These teachings come to us through lineage, and in meeting them, we meet the whole lineage. And the blessings come from all of the centuries of practice that great beings have done with these teachings, these very words that we will be reciting, going back to Jigme Lingpa, inspired in him in part by Longchen Rapcham, and bringing forward the essence of Dzogchen, which we understand to go back to Samantabhadra, to the actual unfolding from reality of the whole universe, which is how Dzogchen understands it. So we have received these teachings from Kesen Sambo Rinpoche, our teacher of 40 years, and Adzun Pela Rinpoche, whom I met in 1996 and who we studied closely with, and also with other teachers, but mainly with them, and have felt the blessings come through in the words. Rinpoche says, Adzun Rinpoche said that the blessings come through especially easily when we sing. And so we have a chantable English for both Jigme Lingpa's text and Adzun Pela Rinpoche's text. So you'll be able to sing it to the traditional Tibetan melody if you wish. This is also a way of resonating with the, like a tuning fork allows us to find the pitch, resonating with these teachings, with the melody, with the words, with our own human connection with each other and with the lineage is profoundly significant. And I'm glad that you mentioned it. It opens up a whole world, the whole universe of the awakened ones who are intimately involved in our practice in the way that we understand it in Dzogchen.
In the deeper teachings of Dzogchen, there is much talk about transmission and blessings, and that ultimately there is a mind-to-mind transmission from the teacher, the guru, the lama, to the student. And in our material culture, that's a little bit hard to fathom in some ways, but it's integral to the tradition. And there's a great metaphor that certainly has stuck in my mind about the accumulation of the foundational practices, which is, it's a large endeavor. It usually takes people a handful of years. And it is said that before you've engaged in the accumulation, the teachings are like a hook, like an ice hook. And the student is like a round, hard ball. And if you try to pick up a round, hard ball with an ice hook, lots of luck. But with the actual practice and accumulation of the foundational practices, the student becomes like a ball of yarn. And then the hook very easily grabs the ball of yarn. And speaking from my own experience, that metaphor seems apt, that in going through the diverse practices, which we will teach, something occurs to the body, the mind, the voice, the speech, and the energy that allows us to become more pliant, more receptive, more open to a transmission that ultimately is obviously mysterious. Receiving something from another's mind, blessings from another's mind. And being a somewhat practical person myself, it works. And so the blessings, which, someone coming in and perhaps being skeptical and super scientific, it's not something you can test or weigh, but we get into relationships with our teachers. And through those relationships and through the practices, there is a dependent origination, which creates a nexus for the transmission of very, very profound understanding. And it's wonderful you bring up that question.
Great. So I'm glad you guys mentioned accumulations, because our next question is about accumulations, and I'll actually turn it into two questions. When will we start to accumulate? Is it during this unit or a future course in this series? And is the intention that we have all of our accumulations completed by the end of the series, or will we have to continue to accumulate?
That's another great question. So a lot depends on you and your time. We have designed this to be flexible because we know that people have different possibilities. The way the first period from January to May covers what are called the shared or common practices, the practices that Mahayana Buddhism shares with the earlier Buddhist tradition. So precious human life, impermanence, understanding karmic cause and effect, learning appreciating the challenge, the faults, as they say, of cyclic existence. What is relying on a teacher like? These are very important topics. And we have designed it so that you have quite a bit of time to really spend actually a month, traditionally 21 days, on each of the four thoughts. Accumulation has to do with the second part, which will begin, we believe, in September. So the reason we do it this way is that we want you to become very, very comfortable with the text, the first part of the text, and then the second part of the text. Very comfortable with the incorporating the whole of the practice as a daily practice so that you're familiar with it. It's already part of your life. And then when you feel like you want to make a commitment to accumulate, we encourage you to talk with us and in a way it's not that you need permission to start to accumulating, but it's depending on where you are, maybe you already have practiced Ngondro, maybe you're already accumulating. But if you're quite new to it, we really want to make this a decision that comes from you naturally. You feel like you want to do it. And when you feel like you want to do it, we would welcome the opportunity to talk with you a bit and just bless you to do it. Making sure that it's going to fit into your life, that you can do it in a sustainable way and this is not a sprint. So we want to help people organize it in that way. No, we don't expect you. Very rarely do people with full-time jobs complete Ngondro in a year or less. But many do complete it within 3 years. That means the accumulations. Setting up a schedule is important. That's why we want you to have definitely a regular practice before you even think of accumulating. And we want you to be familiar with the practice before you start accumulating so that it's a deeply rooted aspiration and you have the ability to, succeed and follow it through. I hope that answers your question. If not, you can come back on the chat. Did you want to say anything?
No.
Mm.
All right. So our next question is also on accumulations.
Okay.
We've already done some practice and
Yes.
accumulations in daily practice and retreats, but not with this specific text.
Mhm.
Are those numbers included in the accumulations here, or is that a separate accumulation?
It depends a little bit. If you have done it on the basis of a text and in the same manner, you might count it. If you feel you really did it, or you could. The principle Rinpoche would accept this. The principle is, even if you've completed Ngondro, we will encourage you to do some accumulations because in principle, we are really getting ready to continue in this lineage. Every lineage will accept the Longshen Yingtik. So it depends a little bit. If you practice regularly with another text and you know the number, counting turns out to be actually important. You could consider counting it. And you could also eventually, and Ngondro is a daily practice. So once you start doing it in this lineage and with these texts, yes, you can count what you do on a daily basis as well. I think that was part of your question.
Yeah, so let me just fine tune that a little bit. There are, with the foundational practices, there are 5 classic practices: refuge, bodhicitta, prostrations, mandala offering, and guru yoga.
Vajrasattva.
And Vajrasattva, sorry. There are many practices that have Ngondro associated with those practices. For example, we have something called Yeshe Tsogel Ngondro. Those are just entrees into Yeshe Tsogel, and those are not transferable because it's a completely different something. But if people have done prostrations, or if they've accumulated refuge, or bodhicitta, or vajrasattva, or mandala offerings, and or guru yoga, those are transferable. And ultimately, if someone wants to be following our lineage, we would encourage them to be doing, if they'd completed Ngondro, we would ask them to start practicing the guru yoga associated with our lineage. Practice the guru yoga.
If you have questions, we can talk about your specific situation.
Right.
Because people have different situations.
And then there are, so it would be best if it's a specific tradition or whatever that you're coming from, that you be in touch with.
Let us know.
Yeah. So we can't cover everything in this generic statement.
Great. So at this point in time, we don't have any further questions on Facebook, so I'd like to open the floor back to Zoom. If anyone would like to speak.
Hey, can I say something about how I feel about this practice?
Sure.
I'm very, very excited about this practice, and so I do have a question to it. And because Rinpoche, you know, our Rinpoche, Atsampelo Rinpoche, said that the Ngondro is just as important as any other practice, like Truma or Yeshe Sokyal or Korokolo or Shambhala or anything. So Ngondro in his lineage is just the same. So I'm very excited in doing actually Rinpoche's Ngondro as I completed a Ngondro in other lineages. Yeah, I wonder if this is how recent that text is actually, that Rinpoche, you know, distilled from Chigme Lingpa.
1999, the first night he spent in our house. He actually asked me if I had translated it into chantable English, which stunned me because I had sort of started to do it and I wasn't sure if it was an appropriate thing to do or not. And I asked him if that was when I asked him if he would write a condensed version that would please include the refuge and bodhicitta of Jigme Lingpa and also the Guru rising from the heart. And I think he had pretty much done it by next morning. So he did it. This was the first thing he did when he arrived in this country. And he did it because he sensed already that we're busy and that a shorter text, which brings forward all of the blessings, you know, is available to us. And of course, he himself is recognized as a reincarnation of Jigme Lingpa.
How fortunate we are, you know, to have this connection, to do this great practice that helps us to you know, to be in interdependence. And from my own experience, like the Vajrasattva, the 3 months, I the first kind of main practice I ever did after getting like the whole Gelugpa transmission or whatever it was the Vajrasattva 3 months retreat. And it was just that there's guaranteed, it's guaranteed there is results. It's not rational. It's just something guaranteed. I was, you know, vomiting up and like green and yellow stuff and stuff just happened. And
Stuff does happen. Stuff
yeah,
really
it's
does happen.
amazing. And it's so
Not
powerful.
also pleasant stuff happens. Different kinds of stuff happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank
Jindaki,
you.
thank you.
Thank you.
You bring to mind, I just want to say something that
Mm.
may be important as coming towards a conclusion here. The practice of Dzogchen is very, very rare. It is very, very effective. It can lead to liberation in one lifetime, in this lifetime. And the practice, as is traditionally done, one avenue in is doing the foundational practices, accumulating the foundational practices, and then getting what are called mind nature teachings. It's one entree in. There are other entrees in which we teach. If you want that particular entree into traditional mode of teaching and a traditional mode of practice and getting access to the mind nature teachings from teacher to student, this is the path. And it's a very, very rare path to come across, a very, very effective path. And we're fortunate in our own lives to have experienced it. And we consider it a great blessing that we have the opportunity and the inspiration to share it with others. So come on board.
And back to the moment where we were considering lineage. I mean, this is what is called a very short lineage, 1999. And many of us have met Adzan Rinpoche or met him online, if not in person. So we know the person who created it, and it's considered a particular boon. Blessings are very fresh. and the blessings touch us, body, speech, and mind. The practice involves us, full engagement of body, speech, and mind. Very intimate connection with your own heart is part of what this practice brings. Your own heart is really, in the end, the locus of the ultimate teacher, which is your own real nature, which is the central teaching of Dzogchen. And this is introduced at the very beginning of the practice and is part of the practice on a daily basis. Every day, we get a chance to feel the Guru in all senses arise from our hearts, bless us, and protect us, hold us as we move through the practices and find again and again how everything dissolves into our own nature, comes out of our own nature, which is not some small thing. Many, many layers like this that really are most meaningful when you discover them for yourself. And that happens through repetition, which is what we invite: repetition, daily repetition. It's a great adventure. It's a great spiritual adventure. Things happen. You see things differently. You feel different. You know that something is occurring, that you are in contact with something that is at once larger than yourself and is also the most intimate thing in your being. It's very precious. We're very, very thrilled, really, in a deep way, to share it.
Great. So we do have a few more questions that have come
Okay.
in.
Okay.
The first is, I have a question about Tibetan. There are some parts of Ngondro I have found difficulty learning how to pronounce.
We will help you. You will have a recording of Jetsama singing both the texts in Tibetan and your text that we have produced, actually with Mark's tremendous help. Mark has produced, actually. Will have the phonetics, and you will be able to listen to the recording and hear Jetsama pronounce it. We also very much encourage, unless you're actually, even if you're fluent in Tibetan, that you practice it in English, and you will learn to pronounce those tricky Tibetan words. I hope that's soothing.
Thank you. So our next question is, will there be some elements in this course for people who have already completed their Ngondro in this tradition and are attending more from a perspective of teaching this practice to others?
So for people, and I know there are people who are taking this course who have completed Ngondro and who are definitely familiar with it. Ngondro, any of these practices has many, many layers. So I would say the first thing, and I appreciate people with experience who are joining us. I mean, we ourselves have done this as a daily practice for decades, and I'm still discovering things. You will have a chance to, if you haven't lately read Words of My Perfect Teacher, Tantric Practice in Nyingma, you can also read, if you haven't, or reread in the context of this course, Kempa Gumpel's Guide to the Words of My Perfect Teacher, which has another layer of information. Adzom Trukpa's text is a whole text. This was the first time you will be seeing this. And Gyaltsen Rinpoche told us recently that the text by Adzom Trukpa, who received it from Pato Rinpoche himself, Pato Rinpoche's text is perfect, unsurpassable. Adzom Trukpa included in his text aspects of his own experience. So that will be something new. As for teaching Ngondro, I think that's a personal conversation. We have not, till now, at all conceived of this really as a teacher training kind of course. However, of course, it is something that would be part of our feeling that one might share Ngondro. And since I don't know who you are and what your the situation is maybe you're already authorized by your own teacher or something like that, happy to discuss that with you. We will be very happy for you and everyone to benefit from this course yourself. That's really the first thing, to complete it yourself and then see what is possible. I hope that responds to what you're thinking about now.
Thank you. Can you please explain the role of the severance practice in the Ngondro?
So Rinpoche has, actually, I was present. It was in Germany. He just recited and wrote out, I have that sacred piece of paper, a 4-line severance practice. And that's the one that's in the Ngondro. We also have, and we did a weekend retreat on it, which is available online. I'm not sure when we might repeat it, but we might, as part of the further unfolding of this course, do the practice of Jigme Lingpa, which is, of course, longer. And Rinpoche has created a sadhana for that, the way that they do it in his monastery, which includes prayers to the lineage and so on. And we did, it's very, very beautiful and very wonderful. And we did do a practice, a weekend retreat on that as part of our Dzogchen Cycles course. That would be available to you. I'm not sure if that's the question that you're answering, that you're asking. So there's a very short version in our text that Rinpoche came up with actually after he had already created the text, and then we, at his instruction, inserted it. You look at it closely, it includes all the steps of Je. If you're familiar with them, you can do it in 4 lines in a very brief and fluid way.
Thank you, Lamas. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor one more time to our Zoom participants if they have any further questions. And I think ultimately we will close, Lamas, with the 2 of you giving some final comments. So it doesn't appear we have any further questions. Oh,
Mark
just raised his hand.
Hopefully this question isn't too personal. If there's something that from your own memory of accumulating or from starting Ngondro, something that's in mind that you'd hope to be able to share with us, or that we could, something that the program will help support. That'd be nice to hear.
That's a very sweet question, Mark. As you know, when we first heard Ngondro, and we had never heard of Ngondro, when Khetsen Samba Rinpoche came to the University of Virginia. For the first time, Words of My Perfect Teacher had not yet been published. His lectures are what became Tantric Practice in Nyingma, which we still use as oral commentary. And we didn't know anything. We had never met any Westerner who had done Ngondro. And we were very, very inspired. I think you've heard us talk about this, Mark. He announced that he was going to leave before we thought he would leave the University of Virginia. And personally, I was heartbroken. We thought we would stay for another month. We were sharing a house and, talking every day. And he started to read from I think it was Joe Wilson, who brilliantly, blessedly asked Rinpoche to read from his autobiography. He started to read to us. He actually read to us about something else we had never heard of, the Dark Retreat, which is also in these lineages, and his experience. He saw light in the dark. And we have to study with you. What do we need to do? We have to see you again. I think I already felt that way. Harvey had been in a Theravada phase. And he said, well, you have to do complete Ngondro and you have to learn Tibetan. I am not going to work in these profound practices through a translator. And he put me in retreat for a week. I happened to have a week free. And it was and he told me not to do too many prostrations to start with. He said to start like an almond, sort of slow in the beginning, and then really intense in the middle, and then gradually tapering out. And I didn't listen. I was 20 something. I wasn't going to be bowed by or cowed by prostration. So the first day, I don't know how many I did, but I'd never done any before. I couldn't walk for several days. I was so sore. So I, since then, take this almond metaphor very, very deeply. And in fact, our course is designed that way. You know, I felt a lot of love in Rinpoche's offering it to us. And I hope some of that will come through as we share it with you. It's something that's been very precious to me, to Harvey. It's been the seat of all my practices as it is intended to be, and it has been for some of you. And it is a very personal thing. There are tears, there's ecstasy, and everything in between. It's really, in a way, getting in touch with your humanness, which includes your profound potential to awaken in this life. Because the awakened being rises from your heart on a daily basis. And that conviction that Buddhahood, that awakening is already in you is central to Dzogchen and something central to Azar Rinpoche's way of teaching us as well. And that's very, very personal. So thanks, Mark. And you can all thank Mark when you enjoy the booklet that he has created. Does a lot of work on that still.
Harvey, did you have anything you wanted to say for that question?
I think Anne covered it. Just to say, these are precious teachings. They often stir up a lot in people who start actually engaging with them in a deep way in terms of accumulating. Just because you may have temporary bounces off or out of the teachings or the practice doesn't mean you can't come back. And it's a bit of a process. And we were blessed to be able to complete them. We want to support people. We've seen how it goes for people in our culture to undertake these practices. We've seen the whole range of people who do them relatively swiftly and people who take a fairly extended period of time to do it. And all is okay. I mean, we're all different. The one thing is, if you decide to accumulate, then we will support that. We have found that some people even find that whole notion of counting and accumulating very, very difficult emotionally and psychologically to engage with. And we appreciate that. But it's one of the things that we pride ourselves on is honoring the tradition to the extent that we can, and also working with making it workable in this modern environment that we live in. And we do, in the modern West, need a lot of support in taking on traditional practice, it turns out. And given what we've been through ourselves and what we've seen in our students, we feel we're offering a very supportive environment for our students to become wiser, deeper, more at ease.
Thank you. We have a couple more questions have popped up. For the peer group meetings, will they be led by senior students or by the participants? And what will those kind of be like?
Our current plan for the peer groups is for it to be peer. We believe and hope that some longtime students will be part of it. There will be a facilitator for discussion, and part of the session also will be for practice. And someone among the senior people in the group, we plan to set this up ahead of time to begin with, will lead the practice. That's our sense right now. As we become clearer about what your needs are and what the feedback is, that could possibly change. But that's the idea for the peer group. And then Lama Namgyal and I will also meet and discuss with you questions that may arise in the process or maybe that will bubble forth in your peer group and you feel, well, let's ask, those guys. So we wanted to give you both those kinds of opportunities for support. Thanks for asking.
Thank you. The final question so far is, should we plan to learn Tibetan, and would that help us receive the transmission?
How old are you? If you want to learn Tibetan, that's wonderful. It is not required. What is required to receive the transmission, and I will be offering transmission on both the Jigme Lingpa and Rinpoche's text, I think around Losar, because that's a very auspicious time. Receiving the transmission depends on being present in an open heart. You don't have to know Tibetan. Even Tibetans, it's read, at least when a Tibetan teacher gives it, it's read very, very, very quickly. Probably lay people who haven't already memorized it won't really be following it. So transmission, as Harvey suggested earlier, isn't about the intellect. It's about allowing the sound to come into your being, your body, mind, energy. Learning Tibetan is great, but I don't want you or anyone to feel that you must do it to accumulate, to receive transmission. Transmission, what do you say? It goes through every part of you.
Yeah, it's not prerequisite, it's not necessary. And it turns out, there's some very, very specific words and connotations that if not everybody is inclined or good at learning languages, if one had a capacity and an opportunity to pick up some Tibetan, it would be
You will
an
inevitably,
assistance, but it would
you
not be
will.
a necessary assistance. It would be an enricher, but not a necessary enricher.
And one thing you will get in your booklet, which you can again thank Mark for, if I understand correctly, you already have the book. The way the booklet is set up, you have the actual Tibetan in Tibetan. You have the phonetic, so you can pronounce Tibetan. You have a long line translation of the verse. You have the chantable English translation of the verse. Those of you who practice with us, you know this. And also, Mark, I didn't even get a chance to ask him because I was thinking this would be wonderful. But if I understand, you also have put the English word under the Tibetan. So if you were sewing, is that true or not true yet? Okay, maybe not yet. In any case, you will have the English right there with the Tibetan, and you will learn some. If you want to learn Tibetan, though, that's a separate thing, and we have resources for you. Tibetan Language Institute, David Curtis is wonderful. And I have beginning study sheets I could send you.
Thank you, Lamas. So I think the questions have slowed down, and
Okay.
perhaps this is the time for just any kind of final comments you'd like to make about the upcoming course. And we'll close with that.
You have friends who are interested in learning about Buddhism, very, very basics. Encourage them, because it really will be an introduction to Buddhism.
A very deep introduction. In other words, we're not requiring anyone to commit to accumulating to enter this course. We are happy for you to take it as an introduction to Buddhism, and then you'll see what occurs. Please do tell your friends. Also, it is a self-paced course. I think that's an advantage.
Yeah, so we are anticipating, it's great if people can get on the train in January, but it will be
It will be open enrollment, really.
asynchronous.
Asynchronous.
So if people want to get on at their own time, and it will be available, so if people are interested.
We've designed it in that way.
Yeah, and we appreciate everybody who's been online on Zoom and people who've been online on Facebook.
So when I first translated into chantable English, I asked Tuka Tundup, a wonderful Dzogchen Longchen Nyingtik Lama, who I also work with very closely, if he would recite it in English to bless it. And he said, that's not how it works. It gets blessed by us singing it in English. That's why the Tibetan is so blessed, because people have sung it for centuries. So perhaps it's sweet to reflect that when you sing it in English, you are also contributing, as has everybody who has been singing it since 1999 or so. We're also contributing to blessing an English version for future English speakers. Another way of understanding lineage. Once we receive lineage, we're part of it, and we contribute to it in our own way. So thank you very much for joining us. If other questions arise, let us know. This will be on YouTube if you have friends that you think might enjoy watching it. And if people have questions, should they put them on Facebook, Emily, or what is the best way?
Yeah, you can send us a message through Facebook.
Okay, and we'll check it occasionally. And very glad to see you today. Blessings to everyone. May your practice, your lives unfold exquisitely. And thank you so much, Emily. You've proven to be a marvelous moderator. And thank you for inspiring us to this idea. Thank you, as always, Mark, for all your work on these texts. Great to see you, Chandate and Guy. And love to you all. Be well.
Take care.
Thank you, Lamas.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Emily. That was great. Mark, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was amazed. I thought you had told me this the other day, that you had put English under. Maybe I must have misunderstood you.
Just the prose. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
Not
already
the
great.
word for word.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. Anyway, it's wonderful.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Ciao, everybody. Nice to see you. Thank you again, Emily.